2024. I'll go again for the recording purposes. Hi, my name is Trevor Phillips, Salem City Councilor, Chair of this committee. I call to order the Water Wastewater Task Force for Friday, July 26, 2024. Should we go around and say our names?
I think that'd be great, Councilor. I'll go ahead and start. I'm Brian Martin, the Public Works Director for Salem.
I'm John Latimer. I'm Land Use Chair for Swan Neighborhood Association.
I'm Scott McClure, City Attorney.
Deanna Gwen, Salem City Council.
Nikki Varney, Salem City Council.
Jason Daggett, Suburban East Salem Water District.
Rajesh Yoga, City Councilor.
Ken Beerley, Glenn Gibson, Watershed Council.
Tim Wood, City of Kaiser. I'm the alternate today.
Dan Kohler, Kaiser City Council.
Kevin Cameron, Marion County Commissioner.
Helena Nahar, City of Salem.
Robert Chandler, Assistant Director. Jason Foley, Public Works.
Alicia Blaylock, Public Works.
And it looks like we have a couple people online. I'm not sure if they're members or.
Yeah, I'm Kurt Highland. I'm the VP of Ops for Oregon Fruit Company, representing SEDCOR.
Deb Gallardi, Rostein Group, consultant support for the revenue slope analysis.
And is there anyone else in the room who hasn't spoken? I think we got everybody. So next up, do we have a motion to approve the minutes for July 11th, 2024?
I so move.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing no opposed, motion passes unanimously. And who's up next?
I will go ahead and kick the meeting off. Thanks again, everyone, for being here. Today starts kind of the meat of some of the policy issues that we want to be talking about with the task force. So we started it last week with the emergency relief program, but now we start digging into policy issues affecting our region. And so we have with us today, Jason Foley had announced his name, he's back in the corner. There's a policy paper written on request for service outside the urban growth boundary. So we're kind of unique here in Salem. We have our Salem city limits, all of it within the urban growth boundary, but we also have parts that are outside the city limits that are still within the urban growth boundary. And so East Suburban Water District is one of those that's represented in the room here. They are outside our city limits within the UGB. We provide water to them, but we're getting some requests from people that are outside the UGB. And so one in particular, I'll mention Red Hawk Winery is having water issues, and we've been basically purchasing water from the city and hauling it out in tanker trunks out to their property. And they happen to be right next to a water main. They're right on the other side. So Salem city limits, urban growth, and urban growth boundary are Michigan City Lane. That's our right of way. Everything to the south of it is within Salem. Across the street is outside of the UGB. It's in Polk County, and they have a water issue. We have a water main that's right in front of their property, and so we want to have a discussion on how we handle those, because there's many situations that could be like that as you go around the urban growth boundary of the city. And Jason and Robert have written a paper on it. And Jason, you want to go ahead and take it from there?
Yeah, sure. So I'm sure, as most of you are aware, water levels in the region have declined. We're starting to see things like arsenic pop up in groundwater wells. We're starting to see other issues in our surrounding community. And so from time to time, we've been getting requests from folks that say, my groundwater well is not performing. Is there anything the city can do? And normally the issue is, we have a very clear council policy X4 that says, if you're between the city limits and the UGB, we can extend service to you. If you're contiguous, you have to annex. If you're not contiguous, you have to sign a consent to annex when that property comes in and you start to border our city limits. what we're seeing and as Brian pointed out, Red Hawk is not the only one. There's been other ones up in West Salem that have started to experience issues with their drinking water wells. Brian's not aware of this, but we just got another request this week from the state saying, can you look at providing service to a mobile home park that's just past the Marion County Public Works building because they're having arsenic issues and they have a declining water table and they're not going to be able to provide water to their residents. So as these things started going up, I took Robert and I took a deep dive into what's the policy on this, right? So it's always been assumed that, the UGB is a hard stop when it comes to providing urban services. The interesting thing about it, and you'll see in your paper, is that sewer service is considered an urban service. Water is not. So from a statewide land use planning, goal 11 says that you can provide sewer services only if there's a declared health emergency. Water service is not considered a urban service. And so water service is available to those people outside of the urban growth boundary. So what we've wrestled with is, can we extend water service beyond our UGB and allow these people to connect? And this is it could be for a number of reasons. You have a declining groundwater well, you have arsenic, nitrate, some sort of level of contamination. So it's a public health issue. And these things are not being mandated by the state because these are mostly private wells. And, the cost of drilling another well or looking for another water source gets extremely expensive really fast. So we looked at it and, from a legal standpoint, yes, we can do it. But as a policy standpoint, under what conditions would we allow that to happen? And so what we've outlined for you in this policy paper is a set of conditions where we think the city could provide services beyond that UGB boundary and allow citizens that are having issues with their groundwater wells to connect to our municipal water supply system. And they would be treated as just like anybody else. They would be able to get a connection. They would be charged the rate that we charge for any customer outside of the city. We would collect SDCs. And so the guidelines that we've put in place and what we want to open up for discussion is on page 2. So under sub 2, under discussion, these are the things we do. And mind you, under state land use planning and with our consultation with Department of Land Conservation Development, it can only be for residential uses. So we can't have a commercial operation outside of the UGB. We can't have an industrial customer come in there. So we've tried to set out a clear list of criteria that would allow us to extend that service. And so under A, we say that we're limiting only to residential users, and they have to demonstrate, the individual user would have to demonstrate a need of less than 5 gallons per minute from their domestic well, or if they're in exceedance of 50% of a primary drinking water maximum contaminant limit, right? So for instance, nitrate is 10. So if you start seeing a 6 or a 7 and you start to see this issue cropping up, then that would allow you to claim a hardship and come to us and allow us to connect. Yes, sir.
Arsenic is one of the things you specifically mentioned.
Yes.
Are you asking whether or not they've looked at treatment for their individual well? Because I'm doing a lot of work in Harney County. They've got arsenic everywhere. Everybody has on their personal wells, their exempt wells for their domestic use. They have treatment on that. They probably have higher arsenic than we have out here. So I'm curious if that could be a precondition of whether or not they've explored that as a possibility before you extend city service.
Well, arsenic treatment is, on an individual basis, is not
Not cheap,
cheap.
but
Right,
it's doable.
it is doable, and I mean, give me enough money, I can make anything happen, right? But
This is doable at a, you know, at an individual household level, but
Right.
at least there.
You talked about loosely the idea of treatment or something else, and then you get into the issue of what is too expensive and what is cost disproportionate. And we couldn't come up with clear criteria that didn't seem kind of arbitrary. So you're correct. You could treat for a variety of different reasons. But our concern was finding what is too expensive. That's why we ended up with most countries there.
And so it would be useful, it seems to me, that if you at least ask that question, have you explored anything? I'm sorry. Didn't mean to-
No, and you know, and honestly, Mr. Beerley, it really, we do see some contaminant issues, but more times than not, it's quantity.
Yeah.
So when you get up into the West Salem Hills, it's a groundwater limited area. You can't get a new water right. You can't target a new aquifer. It's just, the water is declining.
No, I mean,
And so it does, you know, if you put a lens on it saying, anyway, let me go through these and we'll get into this. So we're talking about putting some sort of limitations on when you could ask for that water. We're also talking about limiting it to a 1-inch meter size at the maximum, right? Because we are only allowed to provide uses for residential customers. A 1-inch meter is a lot. I mean, if you have a 6,000 square foot house, maybe you need a 1-inch meter. You have a 1,500 square foot house, we're nowhere near that. But we don't want this water to be diverted. And so the only way we can control how much water is going beyond the UGB is to limit it by meter size. And so here's where we say your property has to abut the current right-of-way where the water main is located. So we're not allowing someone who's 3 lots back to run a service line, you know, through neighbor's property, and then tap into it. So property has to abut. And that, I mean, there is a little bit of I don't want to call it equity issue, but there is some, there's really, you know, we're saying that if you're right there on the border of the UGB, and, you know, the problem that we're going to face is my neighbor connected to the city water, I'm just the next lot back, why can't I? And so that can be a tripping point. So we limit it to you're abutting the UGB, the right of way where the water main is located. We, the city, would not do any work to extend the main to allow service outside of the UGB. If it's there, it's there. If it's not, it's not. You have to be within 300 feet. Your property in the Red Hawk State, your property bumps up against Michigan City Lane, and the water main is there. But actually, on the other side of Red Hawk, and you're, you know, half a mile away, you can't be in the business of just, you know, running our water lines in a, you know, willy-nilly way, right? And just letting people connect.
What if they wanted to pay for that service to actually extend the main? If somebody wanted it, so that wouldn't be allowed either.
Because that gets into another issue of private citizens working and trying to put together a project to extend a public water main that we would have control over,
right?
But not something that we would actually want to see happen.
Given the costs we looked at for what the city is facing in the future with the water wastewater system, have you looked at the costs of providing these kinds of services and what it means to the city's ability to fund the water system?
Yeah, so we look at it as a residential customer, just like any other residential customer would come in. As you all know, our system has adequate capacity currently. We have a lot of room for growth. Limiting this to residential uses only is not a strain on our system. We don't see it as we don't see it as an issue, whereas we're going to have to do large capital improvements to accommodate, you know, 1 or 2 homes or 3 homes or 10 homes or whatever it may be. I mean, we're seeing those types of developments happen all over the city right now, and we've built our water system to be able to accommodate those types of growth. So residential uses is not an issue. So we don't see that as a strain on the system. When you're talking about the rates of use of a residential user.
How does this policy compare to, what was that, manufactured home park that we're,
Sleepy Hollow?
yes, Sleepy Hollow. So how does that situation relate to these new policies?
So Sleepy Hollow was a very unique situation. Sleepy Hollow was a developed community in Northeast Salem that developed before the water system came out to meet them. So you remember from all the council reports, and I sent many your way, we called it Sleepy Hollow Phase 1 because Sleepy Hollow Phase 1 came in and they developed, and Sleepy Hollow Phase 2 developed, and they had access to city water. We were City of Salem citizens. They paid property taxes to the City of Salem. They got sewer service from the City of Salem. They paid the stormwater fee. They paid everything else, but they were stuck in a situation where they were on a domestic well that was serving 45 properties that was highly contaminated with arsenic. They were facing a $150,000, $200,000 bill to put in treatment for those properties. And so what we did in that situation is we partnered with the state of Oregon. We offset a lot of the costs between the state put in a considerable chunk of money. The utility fund put in, you know, a little over $100,000 into it, and the Sleepy Hollow residents paid in their SBC, and we made them full customers of the city. So that one was unique in that we're talking about an enclave within the city that were experiencing health issues. That one was an easy one because these are our people, right? So now we're talking about people. We're talking about properties that are outside of our jurisdiction, but we can also serve with water because at the core of our business, we're in the service business and we provide. And if it's easy to do and justifiable, it seems right. You go to bed at night, you let the right thing do. And so when we put these guidelines together, from you have to demonstrate a need, you have to be abutting the right of way, you can't get larger than 1 inch meter. It has to be used for residential purposes only. You have to pay the established rate for outside city customers, which is higher than normal rate. And the last one is our way of saying we're not encouraging development outside of the UGB, right? Marion County or Polk County land use laws come into play. If you're going to start subdividing so the state land use planning goal 11 says that water service can be provided so long as the density of development is no greater than what would otherwise be allowed. So that means just because you have access to a municipal water system doesn't mean that you can turn a 6-acre lot into 30 homes, right? And that's where we rely on Marion County and Polk County to come in and say, land use planning doesn't allow you to do this, right? You're a residential agriculture, right? You can have no more than a 1-acre lot. And if you start subdividing, you know, back away from the UGB, you still don't have access to that water because we're requiring it only for those properties that directly abut our right of way where the water main is located.
So these rules affect that winery then? You can't provide water to them?
we can provide them water. So the winery is an interesting operation. They have a commercial winery. They also have a residence on the house or on the property.
Oh, I see.
So
You're providing it to the residents.
So
not
we're
to the
providing to
winery.
residents and we limit it to the size that would be necessary to serve that resident. Right, so if we give them a 5/8 inch meter, and if they're gonna use that to produce wine, they have to be running that, open for 24 hours a day, and we would know it.
Yeah.
And we would be able to tell, like, your water bill is not in line with a residential customer. And what we haven't put in front of you right now, but what we will do is we are going to have an agreement that each property outside of the UGB would sign to accept this service. And if we have any indication that you're not using it for solely residential purposes, because we have data out of our ears that shows what a residential user would use, then we can shut them off. And the other thing, is we don't do anything. We would, in the case of this one, Red Hawk, we'd set a meter in Michigan City Lane and say, water is available, come and get it. We have no responsibility beyond that.
These are domestic wells that are exempt, they're exempt
Correct.
wells. So they're available for domestic use, for garden, for up to
Limited irrigation.
1,500 gallons per minute or something like that
Mhm.
so there are other uses other than the domestic use. So it seems like what the city's interest is to provide the residential use.
Correct.
Not the other use.
Correct.
The other question I would have is, would there be any wisdom in asking them to voluntarily cancel their water right for that well?
If they had a water right.
Better have a water right.
If they're using it for commercial, if they're
water.
using it for commercial purposes, then they would have a water right. If
No,
they- a domestic use well does not have a water right.
They can cancel those. They're treated as if they are water rights. They are cancelable, voluntarily canceled. They can be voluntary.
They can abandon the water, they can abandon the well. In our discussions with the Water Resources Department, once the well is drilled for an exempt use, Water Resources is out of the picture. Because I've talked to the water masters about this. I know it is a fuzzy area. Yes.
They also, adjudicate, they use.
So, and we have these situations, not to get it too far down the road into well use, but we have properties within the city that still have domestic wells that they use for irrigation, large properties. All we require is that you provide adequate backflow protection. If you have a secondary source on your property, then we require backflow protection. If Red Hawk or any of the other ones would want to keep their well and connect to the city, we would require the same. And what we're trying to do is get away from the issue of, yeah, I have a well, but it turns my swimming pool the wrong color, right? I mean, so it's like, is that really a hardship, or is that just something, now you're kind of grabbing at straws there. So we're trying to put together a clear set of guidelines where we can evaluate each request on a case-by-case basis and make a decision as a utility. Can we provide service to them? Is there adequate capacity in the water main that they be tapping into? Do they have a looming health effect either by quantity or quality?
So,
Yes,
Go ahead.
so you're saying that the state rule says that we can't supply the winery or anything that's industrial
or commercial.
And is there any flexibility that we can see in that rule, or is that just a hard, fast rule?
It's a hard, fast rule.
And whose rule is that?
That's the state. That's in,
Land use program.
it's Goal 11, Oregon Administrative Rules. So it's, in your paper, you'll see the
So
background.
it's an OAR, not an ORS.
ORS, which established the most. So these are part of the 19 land use planning goals of the LCD. So, and like I said, we would know.
And I think, you know, Jason has alluded to this. There's a benefit to developing in the city. And, you know, it's, when we have a service which is very valuable, and water is probably one of our most valuable services that we have to offer. It's important to, you know, contain growth and try to get growth within the UGB and have reasons for people to want to expand in our city versus expand outside of our city and get benefits that they would normally get within our city. So there's a fine line. And the next thing we're going to talk about is going to cross over that line a little bit.
Yeah.
Chair Phillips.
Yes.
Oh, yes, sir.
I might be jumping the gun, and so I was very patient. I mean, are we to the point of the options and recommendations, or is there more presentation that will precede the discussion of options and recommendations?
I mean, I think we're very close to that options, and we're very close to what the recommendations would be. So, I mean,
So the only one that we've wrestled with, well, there's a couple of things we've wrestled with over the years as we've been looking at this, and it's, do we limit it to currently developed residences? Because you could be in a case where you're just on the other side of Horton Road, you found this nice piece of property, you want to build a house, and instead of even bothering trying to drill a well, you say, I abut the right of way, I can get city water and put a septic system. I always hate to limit it to a bright line, saying that if, you know, as of the time when this policy is passed, all of this is eligible and nobody's past that point. But at the same time, as Brian alluded to, we don't want to encourage growth outside the UGB for the sole reason being that there is water available because they can connect into the city of Salem system.
I think it's important to characterize this as a hardship opportunity that the city has a resource that they can make available at limited circumstances.
Yes.
It is not something that's eligible for.
Right, and so that's why we wanted to put in that you have to demonstrate a hardship. If you don't even have a well, you can't come to us saying that it's less than 5 gallons per minute or it's more than 50% of the MCL.
If you don't have one, obviously it's less than 5 gallons.
Well done.
And
She only dug it 5 feet deep.
Sorry, I
and
can't get any more
there
water out.
there's some precedent. Marion County approved a request in 2020. So as you know, we provide water to the city of Turner. And there were I think it was 5 properties just on the other side of Witzel Road that were experiencing the same issue. And Marion County went through the same process of looking at it, and they had reports from well drillers and saying that this is not possible, but yet there was a water main that was running right in front of them. So Marion County looked at it and said yes, and they asked our permission because they have to. The city of Turner, not Marion County. And we looked at it and said, yeah, that's an actual hardship and it should be allowed. So everything beyond providing water service is up to the counties and their land use planning.
I still have to keep him in check.
Do either of you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Many meetings.
So what we're recommending
I
is
think the county should
And his predecessor was.
build a new reservoir,
Where's that?
huh? Right out there, what was that place out there?
You've been gone too long, you can't remember even. What reservoir? What are you talking about?
Oh, the one that, in fact, there was a lot of talk about it, but the farmers were upset about it because it would take in their land.
Oh, I'm not opening that door. I know you're talking
So what we're Council Phillips, we're recommending that this policy as written be adopted by the Water Wastewater Task Force. We will take that recommendation and we will write an administrative rule that codifies this process. We'll take it to City Council to let them know what we're doing before we take any action on it. But we wanted to get the task force input before we move any further into this process.
So I have some follow-up questions. So, I mean, essentially, are you recommending option 2 under the options and recommendations, which is pilot a connection to the Brooks?
Oh,
No.
that's a different report.
That's the next
We're
one.
getting to that one next.
Okay, I skipped ahead. Got it.
I would, it seems like it would be useful also to have another parameter, and that is that the person that is approved for that would have to pay for the extension. Make it very clear that any connection to the city services, that they would have to pay for that.
That was originally in there, and again, I live this life.
Okay.
So, and I'm not Mr. Beerley, I'm not trying to downplay. Sometimes I know the way things work, and so sometimes those obvious things don't make it into my analysis, because I know that, you know, as the city, we are only responsible for setting the meter, and there's nothing that we do beyond that. And we've had this, Brian and I've had these discussions, like,
Okay.
do we just clearly lay out that they're responsible for, you know, making the connection to the meter? And that's easy to do. Again, like I said, I
appreciate you.
And that would be
It would be
incorporated,
clear.
Yeah.
I think it would be good to have it as clear as possible.
and that would be incorporated into whatever agreement we end up with the landowner. That includes not only that, but and you're responsible for anything downstream of our meter, things like that.
it would be just like any other service connection. If I came out and set a meter at your house, you know, our guys would set the meter in the sidewalk and here it is, come get it, right? But we can definitely lay that out so there's no misgivings about it.
Well, I think it's well thought out. We're ready to go.
So I would just say we will add that to the policy. And I just want to go back to your discussion about treatment of arsenic or other chemicals. We can look at maybe putting something in that mentions that an analysis has to have been done to show that it's not treatable or something, or there's maybe some type
Or
of
that the cost is prohibitive.
cost benefit that does not work out. I don't know what that would look like, but I think that's a good suggestion also to put in to.
Definitely do that.
I can't tell whether Councilor Phillips saw his hand up.
I kind of still do. So like, I mean, I've looked through this, but like, what are we recommending in this? Like above the next thing, option 1 versus option 2. I mean, I agree with, you know, it's got to be residential and the discussion that other members have had so far, but like, what are we, I mean, are we basically recommending what's under considerations, or are we recommending like?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's we either accept this recommendation with modifications or we reject it. So we either are going to do it or we're not going to do it. It's kind of how I'm.
Fair, and I get that. So are we recommending what's under considerations, or like this whole discussion? Like, how do we kind of bullet point out what the action is that we're taking?
So Councilor Phillips, we're recommending that the task force adopts this policy with the follow-up that we will be amending Council Policy X4 to include these criteria for service beyond the UGB. We will be amending SRC 72220 to allow this type of connection. And what's not in here is that, you know, then we'll have an administrative rule that comes before council with these specific criteria for water service outside the UGB. So,
and I appreciate that summary. Thank you for making it clear. And this conversation, a recommendation has to precede the next discussion. Like this is kind of higher up in the decision making.
They're similar, but not the same, and we'll get into that.
Yeah, I would say that if you want to wait on making the decision on this, you can wait and come back with it at the end of the meeting, and we can talk about the next one also.
I mean, I'm fine if they're truly unrelated, but it kind of seems like there's a little bit of overlap. So I'm trying to understand that.
We were afraid of that. Yes, sir.
Okay, all right.
So let's table this. Let's move on to the next issue. Try to get through this so we can get you out at 1:10.
And I will just tee up very quickly, the main difference between the two is in this case, it talks about connecting to a residential property, specifically residential use. The other one that we're about ready to venture into with Brooks Hopmere is we're making a connection that will serve some kind of district or municipality, which has different sets of criteria, different bounds. They're related in that it's water outside of city boundaries, but they're different in terms of receiving customer and responsibilities.
Yeah, it's to the district, not to an individual.
Correct.
Yeah, yeah, okay, that's helpful.
We have a problem?
No, I was just looking at Councilor Nishioka's copy doesn't look like mine.
Do you have any extras?
There you go. That's what it looks like.
Do you have anything?
Yeah, does everyone's look like this?
Now they do.
No, they do. Sorry about that. The thickest one came together in the packet.
This one?
No.
Okay, so the next issue that's related but unrelated is again, we're talking about extending our water service beyond our corporate boundaries. So Marion County was looking at, they have ARPA money available and they're looking at redeveloping the water and wastewater system in the Brooks Hopmere community. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with Brooks is. Currently their situation is they have a crude sewer system that uses lagoons, and their water system is reliant on a groundwater well that's operated by the Chemeketa Community College at their fire training center. And there's some question as to whether or not that water is actually legal, but is it allowed for municipal uses? So the county commission has put together, it's in your packet, a report about what can be done for that community. How do you kind of modernize what they have, and how to make their water and wastewater system reliable. So the cheapest option that was come up with is run a pipe down Highway 99E for 4 miles and connect into the city system. Their current demand is around 40-45 gallons per minute. At their total build out, we're talking maybe 400 gallons a minute. And it's not so much, so the problem that they're facing is that it's not a water quantity or water quality issue that they're facing right now. It's the legality of, is this well that Chemeketa operates, is it legal to use that for municipal purposes? And given their current storage situation, they do not meet fire flow requirements. They have a 3,000 gallon storage reservoir. Domestic fire flow is 1,500 gallons a minute, so they can fight a fire for 2 minutes. Yeah. So you better aim straight, is what they say. So we've looked at that, and we're even though this is something that's well beyond our UGB, it's also something that we currently practice. We provide water to the city of Turner, which is well outside of our UGB. We supply water to Suburban East Salem. They are in our UGB. We supply water to Orchard Heights Water Association. They are partly in and out of our UGB. So from a practical standpoint, it's just adding another wholesale customer. So again, this would be a situation where the county would be responsible for, set a meter, and their team would come and get it. And we would be supplying water through a bulk meter. They would pay a SDC charge based on the size of the meter that they ultimately decide to use. As with other agreements that we have, for instance, with Orchard Heights, we set a limit on how much water we are willing to provide. At Orchard Heights, it's 225 gallons a minute. You know, if it's 400 or if it's 200 that we're willing to provide to Brooks Hopmere, that would give them time, because their phase 2 approach to this is that they do want to develop a self-sustaining water and wastewater system. So this would, if everything goes according to plan, this would become a redundant water source for them and would provide the capacity they would need for firefighting capabilities within that community. So what's different about this is we're not talking about a single residential user. We're talking about a state recognized special service district that is authorized to provide water and wastewater services to those members of the districts that are within their boundary. And we, as the city, would not have to worry about, because we limit it to a set amount of water, we don't have to worry about limiting their growth, their zoning, anything that goes along with that, because we have given them a meter with a set amount of water that's coming through it. What goes on beyond that is up to the county and their land use planning to decide what goes on. Because it's a state recognized special service district, if they add areas to that district, it goes through a state process. So you can't just bring someone into your service district. So everything is still well thought out, well planned. So the question is, for a situation like this, and we will see these, my personal opinion, we will see these come up more and more. Is the city in a position to where we want to extend our services to those outside of our community, but that serves the greater regional need?
That's really the question I was going to ask. What about the future? And there are residential developments in the county all around the city of Salem. What if they decide, well, look at this, it's a good idea, we'll develop a district. He'd do it for him, you know, in a split second.
Give me an example. Give me an example of a residential development outside the city or outside the urban growth boundary that's.
I'm just talking about the future. I don't know of any that would need water now. But you're stepping into a situation where if it develops, and after last week's discussion about the kinds of costs that the city is going to meet in the future to deal with earthquake and a whole lot of other things, is the city, by doing this, then setting a precedent that could get you in trouble?
Well, and I can think of one, Illinois. So part of Illinois has city water.
Yes.
Part of Illinois has their own wells.
And we were approached by
Well,
Illinois.
Is that Highland?
Yeah, it's Highland Water.
Highland Water. Yeah.
Yes, sir. And so that's the case, and Robert and I have talked about this, and I'll let him explain where our thinking, how it transpired on this one.
So you're right. The at issue in part is looking well in the future of what are we getting ourselves into and what is it that we are now committing. Our assessment is that it's all in our control, and just because we did it once, we don't have to always do it. We're not committing in perpetuity to provide water to anybody who asks for it, independent of our capacity to deliver our own needs as we look at our built-out environment. So it's in our control, which is a nice thing. We're talking about one specific connection. Certainly, we're more that people come to ask to connect. They will say, "Well, you did it for Brooks Hopkins. Why can't you do it for us?" And we can always say no. And if the issue is, well, at this point, our build out, our capacity, our issues are such that we will not bring on any more customers. And ideally, they'll come to us with the issue and request before they've already committed to our building.
And And we always look at it from a capacity standpoint. Can we do it? And can we still be within our comfort zone? So we look at a situation as a one-off without making a broad policy that we are going to become a regional water provider. But looking at it as a one-off from Brooks Hopmere, for instance, you're talking about a full build out. They're 0.5% of our total demand. Now, if we get in a situation where Kaiser's wells go bad, or they get into a situation that's a much it'll never happen, right? But that becomes a much
Not in John's lifetime.
that becomes a
Yeah,
much
well, that's a
different-
pretty short period of time.
that becomes a much different issue. Right, and I think our relationship with the city of Kaiser is that we'd have to figure out a way to help them out. But that would require significant capital investment. But for an existing special service district that needs a connection now, we can do it. We can easily do it. We won't even notice it. But I appreciate your concern, which is what keeps everybody else from showing up at our doorstep saying, you did it here, why can't you do it?
I know some years ago, the city put in major lines down South River Road to pick up Illahee and some others. But eventually you're getting into the county, out of the city, and there's a lot of development now proposed going down south of Salem, some in the county and some in the city. And I can see the need developing because you've got the lines down there, they're going to want to tap in.
Well, and the issue specifically with Illahee is that you're correct. Illahee proper, partly in the city, partly in the county. We would never allow Illahee, we would never take over Illahee without requiring them to annex the rest of that county property. And I don't think they would appreciate the city's property taxes if we brought in that golf course.
I got a bill from the city and I'm on Highland Water,
Oh, you are? Oh, but you're in the city part?
Torrey Pines.
Oh,
I pay stormwater,
yeah,
You're in the new part.
you're in the, yeah,
right? And why didn't, when they developed that, why didn't they require
the
the
development.
city, of
Don't
city
that-
water?
Yeah.
Councilor Phillips has a hand up.
Yes, sir.
I do, and I appreciate the discussion. Oh, am I mute? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I appreciate the discussion. I think I've heard a lot of answers to my questions. It sounds like the capacity is there, and that, the comparison of scales, this is like 0.5% of our capacity. And the biggest example of another, municipality or special district would be Kaiser, and that seems pretty unlikely. It seems like it's protective that this is a pilot. I just want to make sure that we have the flexibility to keep looking at this over time. And it sounds like it's crafted in a way that it really doesn't set a precedent that we have to provide water to others. Am I missing anything in that summary?
No, sir, that's exactly correct.
Exactly right.
So I get,
The idea-
thank you for that. And I guess my thought is between 1 and 2, I get that, like, in an effort to maintain water, 1 would be less risky from the perspective of Salem. But I do feel like Brooks is a unique area and there's sort of an ethical obligation to, get them access to good water. Is that something that staff is picking up on in terms of like an equity? We're using an equity lens for more and more things. Is that something that was used in crafting this?
Yes, sir. We looked at it from a standpoint of what their options would be, and also what it does for the Salem Kaiser metro area. Right. So we, even though this is not, we will get revenue from it. It's not a direct benefit to the city, but it helps the region. We solidify the region. We allow for some reasonable growth in that community. It benefits us all at some point. Yeah. We know that there would be an immense struggle for Brooks Hopmere to drill actually, first of all, get a water right that they could use for municipal purposes. And then to drill a water well that would provide them the kind of flow that they need, and hope that this well doesn't contain nitrates or arsenic or whatever, PFAS or whatever it may be. We know that we can provide a very safe, clean, reliable source of water to this community
So it seems like option 2 is reasonable. Can you guys tell me again, like what is it total? Is it capped forever, the volume of water rights that they would have with this?
We would, yes, we limit the amount of water they can draw from us by our meter size. And so
Okay.
it would be in the agreement, just like it is with the city of Turner, like it is with Orchard Heights Water. We can definitely, and we propose to do that, that we will limit the amount of water based on their anticipated need. And if they go beyond that, and again, as we talked about, phase 1 is connect to the city. Phase 2 is to develop a wholly self-supplied water. So we will cap it at what their current need, or not their current, but their current need plus anticipated near future demand.
Chair
Okay.
Phillips, Chair
Yeah.
Phillips, Commissioner Cameron, just so you know, most of this area is surrounded by EFU land, and there's limited growth. I mean, there is some over here in the Highway 99 area, but it's very hard to. We've got people out there that would like to grow, but they can't because it's EFU.
And just with acronyms, Commissioner Cameron, could you remind me and others what is EFU?
Oh yeah, you city folks don't know about EFU.
I totally do, but
Exclusive farm use.
yeah, okay.
All right.
That is the most restrictive zoning that you can have plopped down on your piece of property.
Come and spend a day with me. I'll show you all of it in Marion County in
there's
about
a-
5 days.
And there's a lot of it
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, fair.
Act of God to get that changed.
Yeah.
Mr. Beerley's had his hand up for a long time.
To what extent is the ARPA funding driving this? It seems like that's,
So we
it
start.
seems like it's a great opportunity to provide the interim
Yeah.
supply.
So we start, when Mr. Latimer was still our CAO, we started a study up here
I'm
because
retired. I don't have
we
anything to do with it.
recognized the industrial here in Salem, that was gonna be built out very soon. Where could there be more agricultural industrial growth? And it was already happening there, but it was
Right.
just mismatch. So we had a big study done on what that could look like if we had some control. And this is a part of it that came out of that study, that there needed to be a
consistent
and good water
No, I
supply.
understand, but the ARPA funding,
Yeah, we've
that's
allocated,
fairly recent, right?
we've allocated
And that's only good through what, 2025?
2026, it has to be.
Okay, so
yeah.
that,
Timely.
so that helps to drive
Yeah.
this immediate
Right.
fix to the problem that you've got there. And the other thing that I found is that this is a unique area and it can be distinguished from Elahi and others because it's a designated urban unincorporated community
Yeah.
by the state. So it has a designation that is unique to this area.
Yeah, the board is the chair of the service districts.
And there's a service district
Right,
there
yeah,
as well,
yeah,
but
right.
It's the Brooks Community Service District,
Right.
right? So they're
Which-
authorized to
which would
provide.
be the one that would contract with you, but it's
Right.
also designated by the state as an urban.
Absolutely.
As
So
an urban.
as I said, so that when
Unincorporated
a
urban
special
area.
service district is authorized by the
Right.
state, has set boundaries, you have to go through a process to bring more property in or out.
So I think it's a good idea.
Marion
to
County
hook up
Board of
there.
Commissioners are the
Board.
board for the
Right.
community service districts. And so we contract with Marion County, the Board of Commissioners. They serve as the directors for the Lavish Sewer District, for the East Salem Service District. I mean, so we have that relationship. We have
They
standard
can't
agreements.
just have one job?
Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned
We
some
had
time
one
back that this would be a wholesale.
We could make
that
that
you-
happen.
You implied that you would provide water at wholesale. That's because we're not gonna be billing them.
We bill them at a wholesale rate. And so the difference is, if you think about it, I'm sure we'll get into this in a few more meetings, but our in-city rates take into account operation and maintenance and repair of the system. Wholesale rates are just, what does it cost to deliver water to that point? And then O&M is the responsibility of the service district. So they would be charged a wholesale rate just as Turner, Suburban East Salem, Orchard Heights.
And the service district would install the meters for their users, bill their users, use that funding to support their operation.
17 of them that we know of.
Paid for.
We get paid for
Can't
delivering
figure it
water
all
to a
out.
set point,
This
and
thing is
we
so.
don't have any responsibilities past that.
So we don't get.
So, I mean, is
We get paid
it,
for every drop of water that goes through the meter.
That's what I was worried about. That's what I was
You need
worried
a
about.
new reservoir.
Yes, sir, Council Phillips.
so it sounds like, this would, treat, this new piloted district in Brooks, Hopmere as like Turner. Is it pretty similar to that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Exactly.
Are there any more discussions or questions from this group? And does staff recommend we adopt this or, make a motion and adopt this as a body?
Yes, sir. We would recommend that we adopt option 2, that we pilot this connection and that we allow the county to proceed with their planning efforts to connect to the city of Salem.
I move approval.
I can't make a motion. I'm just-
I did.
I remember.
You moved, I second.
I know you.
I hear that there's a motion that's been moved and seconded. I can't tell who moved and seconded it, but staff,
He seconded.
okay.
Record it.
Just
Hold
for,
on, hold
just,
on.
just
We have
for-
some discussion
We have
here.
one more
Hold on.
question.
You kind of skipped over this anyway at the end there. So how are we limiting this to the phase 1 development only?
Because we have the authority to set the meter size. So you can have an 8-inch pipe, but we can throttle it down to whatever meter size we want. So let's say a 6-inch meter will give you approximately 440 gallons per minute. If we say that you're only getting a 4-inch meter, then you're somewhere in like the 275, 280,000 gallons per minute range. So we have the ability, based on the meter size, that's all the water that can flow through. I think last thing I saw is they're proposing to run an 8-inch pipeline up Highway 99E, but staff will look at, what are we comfortable with? What is their their build out at 400 gallons a minute is, tens of years. I mean, I'll be retired. So we can set, that's how we control how much water we get. We get a meter that we're comfortable with. And if we say we're only going to give you, 275, like exactly what we do with Orchard Heights. You're only limited to 275 gallons a minute. We give you a 4-inch meter and that's it. You're not going to give anything more than that to it.
Okay, because I was wondering if we could put a maximum, whatever their usage is before they get into phase 2 or whatever, based on what their usage has been.
Their usage. So the issue that we're facing with them is fire flow right now. So their usage right now is about 40 gallons per minute, which is
Sure, but no, I mean.
but we
down
want
the road.
to make sure that they have the water they need to fight fires, but not give them so much that they can
Gives them
just
incentive not to do.
right. And as Commissioner Cameron pointed out, there's not a lot you're not going to get a lot of growth in that area, but a consistent, safe water supply will help that area thrive. Right.
And I'll add, with the task force direction to proceed in the option that you choose, then we will come back, we will work with the players to get an intergovernmental agreement. That'll come to council.
That will come to council.
So you'll have a chance to see it again.
Okay.
So, am I correct? We don't have the amount yet determined of the recommendation for the meter. That's coming in future work.
That's correct, Councilor Phillips. Yes,
okay.
we want the authorization to proceed with this planning, to let the county know that we're good with it, and that we can come to agreement on what we want that max water delivery to be.
Okay.
And we have heard there's concerns about making sure it takes care of phase 1 only, and we can look at that specifically with the IGA.
Is there any more discussion?
Yeah, just Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure I'm not going to benefit personally of this, but potential conflict of interest as a Marion County Commissioner.
Yep. If there's no other discussion.
I thought he said he was gonna let us annex Jan Ray.
Okay.
Sorry.
I know that Councilor Phillips needs to get going,
Yes.
so I think we should go ahead and call a vote.
I mean, I can go for another 10 minutes, but then I really have to be done at 1:15. So any other discussion? If not, are we ready for a vote? 1, 2, 3. Okay, all in favor? Aye. And any opposed? Hearing no objection. 1, 2, 3. Motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a recommendation that we make a recommendation to finalize a policy by amending council policy X4 and SRC 72.220. The council policy shall include the above stated criteria. No utility or other city funding shall be used to provide services. That recommendation to the city council.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion that's been moved and seconded. I think I have a better understanding. It was good for me to do it in this order. I think I've heard that this recommendation doesn't overly encourage development outside of the UGB. Are there any other questions or discussion on this motion?
Okay, my quick question was are there any residential users that are using other water sources besides wells, or do they all rely on wells?
It's all wells.
Okay, I was just curious, just because of the wording, either by well capacity or water quality. I didn't know if there were, okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just explain, we're trying to look at what issues may come up, and one would be the capacity of the well, or the other would be the quality of the water itself, so.
Okay,
that's
good.
And just to reiterate, this is staff recommendation that we do this.
Yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? 1, 2, 3, not hearing any other discussion. We got the motion, so we're ready for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 1, 2, 3. Hearing no opposition, motion passes unanimously.
Councilor Phillips, we do have one other thing we wanted to ask the committee. We have our next meeting scheduled for August 8th. And at that meeting, we're going to talk about the Creekside issue. We have a couple staff that aren't able to make that meeting, Jason and Robert being two of the technical people that have worked on it. Alicia and I can carry the water if we need to at that meeting, clearly. However, if you were all open to a meeting on August 14th in lieu of August 8th, we'd recommend we change that. If not, we will stick with August 8th.
I'm good with the change.
14th a Wednesday at
Yes.
noon.
Yes.
I'm going to have the possibility of not being able to be here either way due to traveling, but if I am able on either of those, I'll be remote.
Okay.
I'm fine with it.
I can't.
You cannot on the 14th? Okay. All right. We will keep it on the 8th. So. I think you were optional on the 8th, if I'm not mistaken, Councilor Phillips.
I mean, it's the same for me. I'm neutral. I'm going to be in the middle of a trip either way. So I'm neither for or against.
Okay. You would be available on the 14th, but you're also available on the 8th, right? Okay. I think we'll stick with the 8th.
I'm available on the 14th and not the 8th.
Oh, okay.
Maybe we should have hands raised,
Okay.
just so that you get an idea of how many can be there.
Who's here on the 8th? Yeah, I mean, you're here on the 8th, right?
Yes, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of the
You
first
on the
45 minutes.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
before my next one.
Good enough.
Yeah, we'll stick with the 8th.
Okay.
Got this.
Yeah, we'll take it.
Taking
Okay.
out your grandkids?
Huh?
Any other discussion for today's meeting?
From staff, anyone else, any members, further discussion?
Okay. If there's no
When
other
do we get back
discussion,
to, when do we get back to the issues we discussed last meeting?
With the emergency rate relief?
Well, not just that, but the whole policy over, I mean, what it's gonna cost to develop a system that would react to an earthquake, what it would take to have enough water resources for future development, those kinds of things.
So I don't know that in this.
And wastewater.
Yeah.
be another part.
For this fall, we don't have a cost for what it would take to survive a Cascadia earthquake event, nor do we have the resources, even if we had the money to take care of it right now. I think that'll be an ongoing discussion through our capital improvement plan. We are looking at those things, but
But the wastewater issue is a bigger issue right now. if we ever get rain again.
as far as sanitary sewer overflows. Yes, that's more of an issue than water supply is.
It's all Turner's fault. Thank you, guys.
Okay, yeah, thank you, everyone. This has been very
Okay.
helpful. Appreciate it.
Let's adjourn the meeting for the Water Wastewater Task Force for July 26, 2024. It's good to see
Thank
everybody.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor.
Yeah.